First of all, thanks for your time for coming to the session. I'm George, Core Service Director of APNIC, and I'm moderating this session. Welcome again to be here, and for those who are participating online. For the last couple of days, I had the opportunity to talk to some very new members who are new to this community or to the APNIC conference. So I thought I would, before I introduce the speaker, I would just give a brief background information about APNIC activity and why and what information we are sharing in this session. So services session is a session where APNIC Secretariat, the APNIC members, and the stakeholders come together to discuss about upcoming services activity. So there are four main areas fit under APNIC activities, and you can see here the serving member, regional development, and global cooperation. The first three obviously are aligned with the APNIC mission. So this is what you will hear, the activity that's related to these areas. The key activities on the specifically serving members. So you'll hear in this session just some of the service improvement that's linked to this as a result of the feedback collection and the planning process. So just briefly, some of you may know already APNIC conduct a survey every 2 years. So through that, we collect the feedback from the members and the community. There are also many other channels for APNIC to collect feedback, such as through face-to-face interaction, like the opportunity here in Noumea, also some non-activities, other conferences. There's also interaction with APNIC support teams, such as help desk, and also those who may answer the feedback that's been extended, invited through post the service interaction with APNIC staff. So this is just a quick overview of the feedback planning process, just to give you some perspective. So now let's start, and we have 6 presentations. Time is limited, but I like to remind the speakers that many of us don't have English as their first language, so please speak clearly and not too fast, so we can enjoy what you are sharing. And we will have some time for question at the end, so please come up to the mic and ask your question. And first up, I'd like to introduce Adam Gosling to come up to the mic. Adam is our product manager for the registries. He spoke last time about the new approach that we have taken within APNIC to really ensure what we produce are the best for APNIC members and the users. So today he's going to talk about the direction we're taking to improve online experience further in the next couple of quarters. Adam?
Thank you, George. As George said, I'm Adam Gosling. I'm a product manager for the registry products. And I'll talk about most of those through this presentation. Doing product management is fairly new at APNIC. Sophia and I, the other product manager, started at the beginning of this year, and we're just kind of finding our way at the moment and trying to understand what the users out there are looking for from APNIC in terms of better services. There's activity already about that, and I'll kind of go through some of those things in this presentation. Anyone who's been paying attention will have noticed that we have a new Academy website, and I can't take any kudos for that, but Peter will introduce that later. But the reason I've got this slide up is because as part of that launch there was a new login experience. It's kind of like the old login experience, so it kind of doesn't look very exciting, but there is a major change behind the scenes, and we call it SSO, single sign-on, and allows our users to log in once and then navigate across all of our web properties with a single sign-on, which is convenient for them. But it does something else which I think is more important, and it allows us to create a persistent user profile across all of our content areas. And this is the user profile. It's very simple at the moment, but over time we'll expand it and get more information about you, about your preferences and how you want to work with APNIC. The thing is, APNIC's got a very wide range of content and services and users, really diverse, really diverse, and I'm trying to work out a way to make them all easily accessible for everybody. And so I'm thinking personalisation is the way to go. If we know who you are, we know what you want from us, and we can give you very personalised information about what APNIC has available for you. And those are kind of some of the ideas, and I'll give you an opportunity to have some input into that. Why have I got a little arrow on there? Can I just move that? Thank you. So I'm running a survey. It's a very simple survey, and it just asks some of these questions because there's quite a lot of work. We have limited development capacity, and we have an awful lot of stuff we want to do, and this is only one of them. And so I'm interested in which of these kind of things on the slide here are of most interest to the users. And so the QR code runs to a SurveyMonkey survey and just asks you a couple of quick questions about your interactions with MyAPNIC, because that's where it's all going to happen. The new MyAPNIC homepage will launch in, well, let's call it fourth quarter. It's very close, it's being built. It's a fairly simple front end to the existing MyAPNIC. And as you can see, the resource management tools that MyAPNIC users would be familiar with are listed across the top. And then we've got all of these kind of content widgets that run down the page. And at first they'll be kind of standardized. There'll be up-to-date information, but everyone will get the same home page. But then we'll personalize each of those widgets progressively throughout the next year. So, you know, we might start, depending on the outcome of the survey, we might start with training. And so we know training is a very popular service at APNIC. And so if you're logged in, you'll see what training you've done in the past or what training you've got in your region coming up soon. That kind of information that is specific to you in your home economy. Eventually, I want to take it a step further than that, and this is kind of just hypothetical at the moment, but I think that those widgets could be customizable, so you're not stuck with the same homepage. And it might be that you want a graph of your IPv6 usage up on there, or one of the other products that I'll look at, the security charts or something like that. And you can rearrange the dashboard to suit you. So when you log in, you get what you want there. That's probably going to take a little bit longer, and I've got some validation to do to make sure that it's actually worth, it's what the users want and it's worth us investing the time and money for it. So as I say, there's a survey there. It will only take you 5 minutes, and it'll really help us decide what to do next. Of course, that kind of dashboard front end is not the only thing we're working on. The other speakers will talk about some of those things. We've got point of contact verification, which Ellie will run you through. We've been looking at the performance of MyAPNIC over the last 6 months or so, and Tom will run you through that. Another project that we're just starting is transfer pre-approval renewal automation, which basically is when your pre-approval expires, now you have to contact help desk. We're trying to smooth that and make it a little bit more automated for users. And then the new homepage that I've just mentioned there. Coming up for that is personalising the homepage. We'll continue to look at performance ideas, and I won't go into too much of that because it's while we're doing the code review, we're thinking about maybe larger architectural changes to improve the performance in some of the kind of farer reaches of the region. And another thing is deprecating certificates. This is something that's come up as a result of our single sign-on, and I'm proposing that we deprecate certificate report in MyAPNIC. The user certificates are currently used in MyAPNIC for voting and for RPKI, but there's declining industry support for these, and they're quite a burden on our support system. So they're a bit of a burden in software and in help desk, because they can be quite complicated to use and set up. And I also suspect that this might be an ongoing problem, and so I'm kind of trying to argue that we should just stop supporting them sooner rather than later. This is something that we've been thinking about for a long time. In 2015, we started an alternative two-factor authentication called TOTP, time-based one-time password. I think that's right. And we now have more people using that system than we have certificates. We still have around about 200 certificate holders. So the next step when I get back to the office is I'm going to contact those 200 people and ask their opinion. What would be the impact if we stopped supporting certificates? And if there's no kind of major objections, if it's not going to create really, really serious problems for people, I'm going to try and talk Tom into deprecating certificates. He doesn't want to, but I think it's the best thing for the organisation. It'll allow us to do more with MyAPNIC than we can now. So 2018, haven't seen a lot of changes to MyAPNIC. Internally, we've been working on some stuff as well. This screen grab is from our internal kind of MyAPNIC. It's called ARMS. And the focus that I see on that going forward as a product manager is more automation. So that's to take the load off the host masters and the help desk people and try and make things simpler for them so that they can kind of do higher value support for users. One of those things is the transfer listing automation. So anyone who's been in the transfer market would know that we have a listing service for people who have got resources, people who want resources. And they can list their pre-approval up there. That's a manual system at the moment, so it's a job that we're kind of working on right at the moment to automate that at the back end. No visible change for the users, but an awful lot of workflow improvement internally. The other one is a really big one that we hope to do next quarter, which is when you do make a transfer, all of the whois objects are manually transferred, in most cases manually transferred from one account to another, and it can be quite a workload problem for the help desk, for the member services people, and we want to work on automating that. It's quite a complicated and difficult task, but it's something that I've got on a schedule for next quarter. In looking forward into next year, more automation again, account closure and reactivation is on the drawing board, and we'll look at the member application process. I think Vivek might even touch on member application process. There's some interesting stats that we've kind of uncovered about the member application process. And it actually does cause a surprising amount of work internally. It's not just the people who do become members, it's the huge number who don't become members and are rejected for one reason or another. And there's quite a lot of workload just churning through those applications. I haven't put any stats up, but I do have some, and it can be quite frightening actually. Another thing that I'm really trying to push at the moment is an API. People who are familiar with APNIC would know that we've been talking about a MyAPNIC API or an APNIC API. It's something that we investigated up until about a year ago, and then that kind of went off the boil a little bit. As a product manager, I think this is a really good opportunity for us and for the community. I want to take a kind of a lean approach to it and just focus on the whois. I think that there's a lot of improvement that can be made to whois accuracy by making it easier for people to automate their whois updates. So I've actually got another survey about that, which I really encourage people to fill in. The other thing we said at the beginning of the year in our public plan for the year that we'd look at any signer, a general purpose signer. That's still on the drawing board. We'll take something to IETF and start that process off and write some proof of concept code for an RPK any signer. Very simply, that is a new feature for the RPKI system that allows you to associate yourself, your resources, and pretty much anything, given the name AnySigner, and lock it all up in one certificate. That'll allow us to do some interesting services next year. So this is kind of an infrastructure, it's an enabling technology, and we have some use cases that we'll look at for next year, letters of authority, and possibly something in the IRR, in the routing registry. So anyone who's downloaded the slides can use the QR code to have your say about an API for the WHOIS. I'd really appreciate a lot of input on both of those. Coming up later this year is a tool that integrates a forum, a browser-based forum with our mailing list. This is software that we picked up from under our MOU with the RIPE region. So they created this thing. You can actually see it on the right. It's running live on the RIPE website, has been for quite some time. We've done the back-end work to integrate that into our mailing lists. We've just got to do some design. I mocked this up. Make it pretty at the front end and then deploy it sometime in the fourth quarter as well. This is nice because it allows people who still like their text-based emails for their discussions to carry on, and if you post to the mailing list, that post is reflected in the forum, and vice versa. If you post to the forum, it gets sent as a text-based email, and it just allows people more options when they're viewing the mailing lists. RDAP. So RDAP services we started in 2015 as an API, and then in 2017 Byron just kind of stitched together a client, a web-based client for that, for the WHOIS, and that's kind of been sitting dormant in the APNIC website. It has some limitations because it's got quite a limited set of data. Expanding that data set is kind of next to impossible. In fact, it probably is impossible because it doesn't exist. But the WHOIS client allows you to step through through all of the changes that have happened to those resources and the registration of them. The next step this year, and I'll got it on the next slide, is an RDAP web client. So this is just straight up RDAP, and it's a nice clean interface as an alternative to WHOIS. If I can go back, I kind of got ahead of myself there. I'm kind of thinking that RDAP is ready for a kind of a bit more mainstream usage next year, and one of the approaches I want to take with it is to actually put the search capabilities in context of where you would want to use them. And so in our area of the website where we're talking about transfers, I want to put a WHOIS client nice and handy and close so that you can see who's had the resources before you and see the background to those resources. So there's things like that coming, but this will be the first thing, which is just a very basic, clean way to query IP addresses and or AS numbers. Again, that's built. The code is already there. I've sent some changes back, and they need to be programmed, and then we'll tidy up the styling, and that should launch in fourth quarter as well. My colleague Sophia is here as well this week. She's the other product manager. Her focus is on information tools and statistics. She's got three particular areas that she's working hard on. One is the routing information tools, and she's got some hypotheses there that maybe the view of the topology in the Asia Pacific is not as good as it could be. So she's actually been doing user research. She's been sitting down with users in another room all week and asking them what their big challenges are and really digging down deep. They're kind of like 45-minute interviews and to discover their pain points. And then from that, she'll come up with proposed solutions for that. She's already finding some interesting stuff. I don't think she's in the room. She's probably locked away doing those. But she's getting some really interesting feedback. If anyone would like to talk to her, there's her email address, and I'd encourage you to get in contact with her. Another thing that she's been working on is I think it's a really exciting project. And this is, I'm not sure that Net Health Check will actually end up as the production name, but it's a tool for looking at the malicious content on malicious traffic rather on your network. I won't go too much into the detail of how it's done, but it's specific to your network. It's for members who are logged in using MyAPNIC login to look at what traffic's on the network that they should know about. We've progressed quite well with that. There's kind of a proof of concept code in the background, but at the moment she's just showing mock-ups of this, and she's been testing those to get a better understanding of how people might like to use that sort of content. Again, Sophia's email address is there if you're kind of interested in that. It's a really interesting project that I think will be really useful for people if you want to follow up with her directly. The other area that she's working on is more just kind of statistics based. We did some research probably a year ago now and found that in asking kind of people at the APNIC conference what they wanted, they kept asking us for stats that we already published somewhere. So we came to the conclusion that we've got it, but you can't find it. And so she's working on that as well, and trying to kind of improve accessibility for all of that. One of those is the Internet Directory. If you've ever been to stats.apnic.net, we've had this kind of beta code there for quite a long time, and in the background we've been completely rebuilding that basically from the data up. And it's kind of on the verge, I'm not really sure, but it's right on the verge of being published. And it looks great, and it's got better data than ever. And I guess that's my last slide. I hope I haven't taken too long. Thanks very much.
Any question for Adam? Just a quick question. For the survey that you've just shared, how long would they be open for that people can go and participate?
Yes, so just to be clear, there's two surveys. One is about the preferences for the MyAPNIC homepage, the new tools on there, and the other one is about the WHOIS API. I'll leave them open till the end of this month, and you can get them. You'll be able to get them on the website. I'll write a blog post when I get back, but they're in the slides there.
All right, thanks, Adam. Okay, if there's no more question, then let me introduce Guangliang. The next two presentations are actually kind of related, and hopefully this one would give you a better, paint a better picture for the upcoming one that Ellie is going to present. Thanks, Guangliang.
Yeah, thanks, George, for the introduction. My name is Guangliang Pan, Registration Service Manager at APNIC. Today, my presentation title is Understanding Contact Information in the APNIC WHOIS database. Before I go through my presentation, I would like to give you a bit of background information why I want to do this presentation. You may know, before 2010, we only have admin C and text C pointing to a person or role object as a contact in the APNIC WHOIS database. And in 2010, we have a policy proposal and introduced the IRT object, and which actually implemented in 2010. And later in 2017, we also introduced organization objects. You may wondering, why we have this different contact informations. You may get confused and how to use them and how to search them. So APNIC Whois database is used to find contact information for different purpose. And the resource holder are also required to update the contact information in the APNIC Whois database. So we also have a policy proposal, POP 125, we'll present in this conference. It's about to validate the abusive email contact in the IRT objects. So to be able to help you understand and the policy proposal, how to respond to the policy proposal, I want to give you a bit of background information on how APNIC Whois that contact will relate it. When you search an IP address or AS number, and you will see the following contact information. You will see the IRT object. You will also see the organization object. And then you will see a role object or person object actually linked to the admin C and text C. And what are those purposes of this context? And let's see an example. Can we just switch to Whois search? And if you are on your laptop, can I also ask you if you want to follow and do a Whois query on 1.44.0.0/16? So you will see a Whois search result. And then you can also first see the ILLM object, right? The ILLM object is this /16 is belong to Optus. And they have linked it organization object, role object, and IRT. You can move down. You can first see is the IRT object. Move down a little bit. So we can see the IRT object. And then you can move down. You can see the organization object. And then keep going. You can see the role object. So this is the contact information when you search an IP address in APNIC Whois database. Yeah, if you in your laptop, you can do a search and then keep this information. And then I can explain to you one by one, so, and how to use those contexts. Okay, can you switch back to the slide? Thank you. So, first you will see the ILLM object, right? That is the range for Optus. And in that ILLM object, you will see that org is actually linked to our organization object. And you will see an admin C linked to our object called AO3-AP is the role object. And text C also linked to the same role object. And the man IRT is linked to our IRT Optus-AU, Optus.com. So this is an IRT object. So you can see the ILLM object linked with this contact information. The next one, you will see that IRT object in the Whois search. So the IRT have the contact information. So this abuse mailbox is very important. And that is for abuse contact. And the policy proposal actually related to this one. In the tomorrow, there's a policy proposal. It's about how to validate those content. And we also have admin C and text C linked to a role object. Later you will see it. So the purpose of the IRT object is specially responsive to security incident reports and activities. Yeah. Abuse mailbox is specified the email address to which abuse campaigns should be sent. So you will also see the organization object, right, after the Whois search. This is the organization object for Singtel Optus. This is the organization name for that legal registration. They also have the address, phone number, fax, and email address. So you can see the business information, who holding the resource. And the purpose of the organization object is contain business information about the organization that holds the resource. And each APNIC member has their unit organization object linked to their resource delegated by APNIC. And you also see the admin C pointing to a role object in this example. Admin C actually stands for administrative contact, and Tech C stands for technical contact. They are responsible for the network administration and operations, usually used for troubleshootings. And this is one example for the role object. It's Optus, administrators. So they are actually a role, it's not a person. It's a group of people. They have the phone, fax, and email address. You can contact them. Benefit of using a role object compared to a person object. I would encourage people to use a role object instead of person object because the inquiry can be handled by a group of people instead of one individual. And you can also avoid personal contact information sharing in the public whois database. And you don't need to update each individual resource record when a person actually leave the company or change their job. So because that linked to the role object, not a person. And finally, I would like to say the responsibility of the resource holder. According to the APNIC policy document 5.3.1.1 is updating registration details. And the IRs means the resource holder must update the registration record when any of the registration information change. So this is the requirement from the policy. And this is the two URL refer to my presentation. One is all the role object template in the APNIC whois. They will explain you each template in detail of the purpose and format. And the one is the policy document require people to update the registration details. Yeah. Questions? Thank you.
Question, Bo Quang Liang?
Thank you.
No? Okay. Now I'd like to invite Ellie to come up to talk about the whois accuracy support project, which is like mentioned in Adam's talk as well. So Ellie, here you go.
Hi. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ali Tafai. I work in the service area. I'm one of the people who evaluates internet resource requests, and for the Pacific members in the room, I also involved in liaison and outreach within the Pacific economies. Oh, how do I go here? So, while I'm waiting for my presentation to be brought up on screen, I'm going to talk to you about the work that we have been doing in the whois keeping the contact information updated within the APNIC whois database and the different contact types. So anyway, while my slides are being brought up, I'll move right along. So in the past, there has been a lot of discussion within the community about outdated contact details which are registered, and how we go through the process of keeping how we can go about keeping these contact details updated. And this information has been, this feedback has been provided by various different stakeholders within the community. So I'm going to cover a little bit about, a little bit of background of how this came about, the progress that we have made in regards to the work we've done, along with future improvements. So as I mentioned, there has been a lot of past discussion about this from various different stakeholder types within the community. So what we did is we took all this feedback that we received in the past and presented the work that we are looking to commence in this area at APNIC 44. So there's been a lot of motivations behind doing this work, such as simplifying the contact update process to keep these records up to date, enabling contact details to be updated at a single point within MyAPNIC, removing the complexity for corporate and technical contacts of having to navigate where to go to update all of the different contact types, and keeping the records up to date. Progress of these contact updates are going to be tracked, and along with removal of inaccurate data and reducing unnecessary invalid contact complaints. So the progress that we have made so far, what we found based on past feedback that we received was some of our members, they have their own internal systems. They very rarely go into an interface which we provide called MyAPNIC to update their various different contact types. So because they very rarely go into MyAPNIC, updates to different contact types are very rarely made. So we're looking at sending in future a contact review reminder reminding them to go through and review their contact types, a single point where their contact details can be updated, because one of the issues is at the moment is there is various different places where you can go to update the contact type. So having a single point will make this process much more easier. Along with all updates which are then made as part of this process will then be tracked. And we understand this is going to be an area which is always going to be a work in progress, but the first part of this, the work we will have done, will be implemented in October. So with the first phase, this is going to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. So it's going to be broken down into 3 steps. So step 1 is going to be the screen that you click on in order to update the contact details associated with your membership. 2 is going to outline where you can update, is the place where you go to update all of your company contact details relating to your organization. And step 3 is where the place that you will go to update all of your incident response contacts, so the contacts who take care of abuse complaints or incident response handling. Now, I just want to bring to your attention, because we're going to send this reminder out to all of our corporate and technical contacts, based on the contact type which you are, for example, our corporate contacts will be able to update steps 1 and 2. However, our technical contacts will be able to make updates to their own contact details. However, any additional updates that they make will then need to be approved by a corporate contact. So if I click on step 1, this is what the page looks like. So this is what the page will bring up. All of the contacts relating to your membership. You'll be able to add a new contact, edit a contact, or delete a contact. In this case scenario, we're going to go and delete a contact. So what will happen is, depending on the option you choose, it will bring up a contact screen. So we've chosen to delete a contact in this case. So you'll see a pop-up screen containing the contact details of the contact you wish to delete. And you can choose to delete that contact or close the screen. For step 2, this is what will be displayed when it displays details relating to your organisation. So these are business details that are currently registered within your organisation object within the APNIC Whois database. Now, it's on a side note, it's important to keep your organisation up to date, because what will happen is the information registered within the organisation object, the economy code which is listed, will in future have impact on the stats file. So in the past, what we have done is we have used the economy code within the stats file based on where the organisation has been registered. However, what we have found is some of our members provide services in different countries. So they may, for example, provide services in New Zealand. They may be registered in New Zealand, but provide services in Australia. So because we have used the economy code based on where the company is registered, because we have then received queries from our members saying, hey, we're having issues for our customers who we provide services to in, say, Australia. We're having issues with geolocation. How can we go about changing this economy code? So what we are looking to do in future is register the company code based on where they provide these services, but also within the stats files in future, we will also include the economy code which is registered within the organisation object. So this you'll see in this example I've shown you here. What I've done is I've taken an example of a block which we use, which is currently used for conference purposes, and I've included what it will look like and the economy code which is registered within the organisation object. So moving right along, you can see the next step, which is step 3, which contains information registered, contact details registered for within an IRT object. So you can add new IRT objects, or you can also add existing IRT objects in this process. Now, it's important to note how contacts we realize that there are some of our larger members have multiple IRT objects registered. So you may see, when you go into this screen, you may see multiple IRT objects because you may have multiple incident response teams handling, taking care of different resources. However, if you do not have that authority to update a particular IRT object, there will be a message which will be displayed on screen letting you know that you're not able to update a particular IRT object. So as I mentioned previously, this is going to be an area which is always going to be a work in progress. However, we do have been working on next round of improvements which we implemented sometime next year. So we're also looking at adding a step 4 to this process where you will be able to update your WHOIS contact objects for, say, for example, any role object or person object which is referenced within your resources. So this is a step where you will be able to update these objects as well in future. We're also looking at improving the contact review reminder email process. So what I mean by this is if for any reminder emails in future which will be sent out to corporate or technical contacts which bounce, then what we will do is then send a second response to those contacts associated within the membership who are still valid, notifying them about that invalid contact who has bounced. We are also planning to tag those invalid contacts and display them within a consolidated feature page within MyAPNIC. So it's always going to be a work in progress. We value your feedback, so if you have any feedback, please send it through. And future changes could also, we need to consider the impacts of future policy proposals. So this also may shape the direction that we take. So if you have any feedback, please send it through. We welcome it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie, for a very detailed presentation. Any questions or comments? No? If not, I actually have a couple of questions. So you mentioned about sending this reminder, maybe for you and Adam. When are we looking at having this reminder to be sent out to those who we want to remind to update contacts? Reminder emails, the timing of that? We're looking at potentially this year, right?
That's right.
Yes.
With sometime next quarter.
Okay.
Or maybe the first one's
All right.
in November rather than. We're still building the platform. It's going to be tested.
Okay, good. My second question is, there's 1, 2, 3 steps here, and you mentioned a step 4 coming up. So can I just clarify that step 1 is to do with the contact, authorized contact, membership contact, so that information is actually private, what they're providing to APNIC, that's confidential contacts. And the step 2 and 3 are related to WHOIS object, contact information, and therefore it's a public information.
Yes, so that's correct. What George has mentioned with step 1 is information. When you go into MyAPNIC, this is information which you see only relating to contact details for your membership, so you can only see that within MyAPNIC. For steps 2 and 3, they're relating to contact details which are actually registered within the APNIC WHOIS database. So it's publicly accessible information.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we're getting a bit technical. I'd like to invite our software manager, Tom Harrison, to give us an update on the registry improvement.
Thanks, George. Today I'll be talking about some registry improvements that we've made since the last meeting, some we've finished and some which are currently in progress. Sorry. The first topic today is the Registration Data Access Protocol, otherwise known as RDAP. I'll briefly recap on what RDAP is and then talk through some usage figures, some server improvements that we've made, and also the cross-RIR consistency issue. And after that, I'll be talking about MyAPNIC performance. So RDAP is the replacement protocol for port 43 WHOIS services. The protocol is defined in such a way that it's usable by both names registries and number registries. And like port 43 WHOIS, it's just for queries, not updates. So registries will deploy RDAP alongside their existing update mechanisms. RDAP has three major features over port 43 WHOIS. The first one is standardized data structures. So it defines in detail what requests and responses look like, which is much better than port 43, where almost each server operates in a different way with different formats. The second is internationalization support. Because RDAP is built on top of HTTP, it can include character set and language information in the responses, which is more useful than port 43, where there's nothing like that. And finally, RDAP defines a bootstrap mechanism, so it's possible to take an IP address or a domain name and look up a registry maintained by IANA to find the authoritative server for that address or domain name. With port 43 WHOIS, people either have to use ad hoc mechanisms or the rules have to be built into the client itself, and those rules tend to be messy and rely on heuristics and need regular updates and so on. RDAP's been deployed at APNIC in a production capacity since about 2015. That's still relatively recent in this space, and our registry queries today are still, the vast majority of them are still port 43 WHOIS. So we get 500 queries per second over port 43 with spikes up to 2,000, and whereas RDAP gets 10 queries per second with spikes up to 50. Now, while that's small, it's still significant, and it is edging up over time. At APNIC, we want people to use RDAP. It's a better system than port 43 WHOIS, so we're working to remove barriers to adoption and to reinforce the advantages that RDAP brings. So the first thing we can do is make sure that the server actually performs well. When we were doing the initial implementation work here back in 2014, we did a sort of simple proof of concept that's built into our WHOIS server, and we were concentrating mostly on conformance with the specifications and making sure the specification worked, not so much on performance and scalability. So over time, that's has caused us some issues. So last year, we started working on those performance issues by writing a standalone server that pre-generates responses at startup rather than processing queries on a per-query basis. So these are graphs for April 2018. We deployed the new server on the 20th of April. Before that time, you can see a rough correlation between traffic and response time. Traffic figures as low as 50 queries per second could cause spikes in the response time. And then after 20th of April, that correlation goes away. So since then, we've seen response times stay pretty consistently below or around 20 milliseconds. The spikes that we do see are up to 30 and 40 milliseconds, so it's much better than it was. However, this is only half the story. This response time is about the server itself, not the full round trip to the client. So our infrastructure staff are looking at distributing the RDAP deployment so as to solve the latency packet loss issues that we see with a non-distributed deployment. The second thing we're working on is cross-RIR consistency. Each RIR has an RDAP service, and each service mostly conforms with the base specifications, but those specifications allow substantial operator flexibility. And that's really, there was no other way to do it because the specifications have to operate in many different, for many different registries, operating in many different regulatory environments, so that flexibility really had to be built in at that level. But for the RIRs, we can work together to write a profile or equivalent document that goes above and beyond what the base specs say, so that people who write clients that are targeting IP addresses have more useful guarantees or more things that they can rely on to make their clients more useful. So an example of this in the specs is that it's not actually mandatory to return contact details in an IP network object, which isn't, so if you can't rely on that as a client writer, it just makes things more difficult than they need to be. So yeah, just to recap, we're working with the other RIRs on consistency. We hope to have a profile document that we publish so that clients know what they can expect from each RIR when they're developing their software. The second topic today is MyAPNIC performance. We've made efforts in the past to improve MyAPNIC's performance, but we still get feedback, or rather regular feedback about it, and there's still a fair bit of room for improvement. This will remain a key focus for APNIC technical staff until it's resolved. In the software unit, we're currently working on front-end and application layer improvements, so things like optimizing static assets, limiting the amount of data that flows between client and server, and so on. And separately, our infrastructure staff are investigating cloud options. Our current effort began in June, July, and we had an initial release in late August. It's only been a few weeks, but for the pages we were targeting as part of that release, we've seen a roughly 20% improvement. For MyAPNIC as a whole, the improvement's been about 10%. So hopefully we continue to see improvements like this over time as we continue releasing updates. A couple of things in brief. The first one is bcrypt password hashing in WHOIS. Previously, we only supported the crypt and MD5 hash algorithms in WHOIS. Both of these have serious security problems that are solved by bcrypt. We now use bcrypt for all new maintainer and IRT objects, and also if you go into MyAPNIC and update a password for one of those objects, it will also start using bcrypt. In the near future, we plan to update the rest of the objects to use this new hash, and then to remove support for crypt and MD5. The second thing is the RPKI publication service. This is specifically for people who run a self-hosted RPKI engine, and it means that they don't have to also run a public rsync server at the same time. So instead of pushing objects to rsync that they run, they push them over a protocol to a service that APNIC runs, and APNIC publishes them on the member's behalf. And the third thing is registry event sourcing. Without going into too much detail, event sourcing is an approach to application design that allows for the audit trail of an application to have guaranteed integrity. So this is not something that has massive external visibility, at least at the moment, but it's really good for our internal quality of service and auditability. So that's all. Thanks very much.
Question for Tom? No? It's good to really see the reduction in the RDAP response time, so we look forward to seeing the reduction in the MyAPNIC page loading time. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to invite Vivek Ningam. Vivek is the Member Services Manager in APNIC, and he's going to talk to you to give you more insight about the membership and resource application process. Earlier on this year, we made some improvement in streamlining the process, so I'll let Vivek to tell you the details. Thank you.
Thank you, George, and good morning to all of you. My name is Vivek, and I currently manage the Member Services team. So one of the core functions of the Member Service team is to process new membership applications and then to delegate IP address and AS numbers to our new members. And over time, as the policies have changed and the internet industry itself has evolved, we have also changed the type of questions we ask and the different checks we do as part of this new membership process. So this is going to be an informational presentation to give you some insights to how we do it. So if any of you are interested in membership, or if you know someone who is, hopefully you'll find this information useful in preparing for your APNIC membership applications. So every RIR, they have slightly different versions of how they've implemented the last/8 policy. So if you look at RIPE, their policy is restricted to 1/22 per member, or LIR, but you don't have to demonstrate a need for your IP with RIPE. So as a new LIR, they will give you 1/22, nothing less, nothing more. If you look at ARIN, their final /8 policy is needs-based, but there's no limit on the amount of IPs you can get from them. So ARIN continued to delegate IPs based on their members' needs, and for that reason, they ran out of their IPv4 pool, I think sometime in 2015. So APNIC's policy is a bit of a combination of the two of these policies. So the spirit behind APNIC's last/8 policy was to conserve this last/8 so newcomers can get a small block of IP to connect to the internet while they gradually migrate to IPv6. So in APNIC, our last/8 policy is also capped at a maximum of 1/22 per member. But on top of that, you also have to demonstrate that you have needs for those IPs. So if you can only demonstrate a need for a small block like a /24, we will only give a /24. But if you can demonstrate a need for something larger like a /21 or more, we will give you your last /22 from the final /8, and then you go into the waiting list to get one additional /22 from the recycle pool when it's available. And then that's it. After that, you cannot request for any more IPv4 addresses. So when I started working at APNIC some 10 years ago, things were a little bit different. So back then, some organizations who had needs for IPs and also met the criteria to get IP addresses chose sometimes not to apply for APNIC membership and IPs because they had the option to get their IPs from their ISPs. So in those days, there were no policy restrictions on how many IPs a member could get. So the existing members, they could get large blocks of IPs and then sub-delegate them to their downstream customers to fulfill their IP needs. I needed to say something more there. Okay, yep. So in those times, we only used to get a couple of hundred applications every year, and most of those applications were from ISPs. So things started to change a little from 2011 when we reached the last/8 pool and implemented the final /8 policy. So the initial increase we saw in the applications, that was anticipated because we knew some of those members who were previously getting their IPs from their ISP, now they could no longer get them because their ISPs could not get more IPs. But apart from that, we also started to see a lot of applications from end-user type organizations like banks and enterprises for their multi-homing needs. And apart from that, we also saw some applications or suspicious applications because of the policy restrictions of 1/22 per member, and some members needed more than /22. So as we observed these changes, we also reviewed the questions we asked and what kind of evidence we asked for to ensure that we are delegating these resources according to policy and in a fair and responsible manner. So the new membership process itself has always been the same. Once you submit your online application, we do some due diligence checks on the organization. After that, we do some checks on your needs to make sure you meet the policy criteria. And then when you pay your fees, we open the account and delegate those IPs. But in the next few slides, I will try and explain what are the different checks we are doing through this entire process. Right, so The first thing we check for is evidence of business identity, and this is to ensure that a registered legal entity is signing the membership agreement with us. Typically, most new companies who apply are incorporated businesses, so we ask them for a certificate of incorporation. And where possible, we also do those checks online through different company registries to ensure that that company is still registered. We've had cases in the past where the applicants have given us a certificate of incorporation document, which was dated a few years ago. So it was a few years old, and when we checked it online, we noticed that company was deregistered for a few years. So when we questioned this, the applicant stopped responding, so we had to just cancel that application. So the next thing we check for is evidence of business operation, and this is to ensure that this organization does have some operations and it's not just set up to get IP addresses. So typically, to check this, we will ask you for a bank statement or utility bills issued under the organization name. And we choose these documents because we feel companies like banks and utility companies, they are less likely to collude with organizations just to help them with getting IPs. And then after that, we do some checks on the identity of the applicant to make sure that they are associated with the company that is applying for the membership. So for this, we will ask you if you have a business card to show you work there or a letter of employment. And we will also ask for a photo ID of the applicant to make sure they are who they claim to be, they are, and there's no identity theft happening there. So once we finish those organization checks, we then move on to assess the needs for your IPs. And for that, we will ask you for the current IP addresses you're using, and if needed, we will check in whois that is registered to you, or we contact the custodians to make sure they have authorized you to use it. We will also ask you for a detailed network plan so we can understand your network in more details and how you plan to consume those IPs. We'll also get your list of equipments to make sure you can consume the IPs you're applying for, and the equipment invoices to make sure you do own those equipments. And if for any reason you can't provide some of them, or if you have needs for a large block, we may also ask you for signed copies of your service agreements with your service providers to verify that you have the needs for those IPs. All right, so those were the standard checks we do for all applications, but there are certain things we look out for in every application which may trigger some additional questions. For example, if you don't have a company website or any publicly available information about your services, we will ask you some more questions to understand how you run your business, how you promote your products and services. If you're a new company, we may ask you for a company profile document which outlines your company strategies, goals, and so on. Applications from individuals, well, APNIC membership is open to everyone, including individuals, but if you apply for IP addresses as an individual, we will do some more checks to make sure that you are actually running a business as an individual. But so far, most applications we've got from individuals have been from consultants who are helping other organizations, so we have asked them to resubmit it under the organization that is applying. And likewise, there are other things we look out for, and I have mentioned them in this slide for your reference. All right, so while the volume of our applications are going up, the percentage of those applicants becoming member is widening a bit more. And the number one reason most applications don't proceed and open up is because when we ask for these different evidences, some members just stop responding. So we are generally quite flexible with these different evidence we need. So as long as you can explain why you can't provide some evidence, we will work with you so you can give us something else that we can use to process your application. And then lastly, some of our new members have given us feedback that the new member process can be a little bit confusing or time-consuming, a long process. So there are a couple of improvements we have worked on this year to address these feedbacks. The first one, single point of contact, is something we have already implemented. So in the past, we had a staff member from the member services team do the organization checks, then someone from the registration service team would do the needs check, and then the billing team would issue you the invoices. And earlier this year, through some restructures of our team and upskilling, we now have one staff member from the member services team who does the entire process from start right through to delegation. We are also planning to make some improvements to the membership form itself so it has more information to help you complete it, and it also captures all the information we require to process it. So that should reduce the number of iterations it takes, and that should in turn speed up the entire membership process, giving our new members a better experience. So hopefully we can make those improvements in the near future. And that is all I have. Happy to answer questions.
Question or comment for Vivek? No? Thanks very much, Vivek. I know Vivek has used the example and in the initial slide to talk about policy related to IPv4, but we all know APNIC does allocate IPv6 addresses as well, so just to add that. Lastly, Peter, I'd like to invite Peter as our training curriculum manager, and he's going to talk to us about something really exciting that happened just lately.
Thank you very much, George. I am very excited to give this presentation because training is such a big part of what APNIC provides to members and to the community. Before I start though, I just want to get a hands, if anyone's, raise your hand if you've used the APNIC Academy or been to the APNIC Academy website. Excellent. Raise your hand if you've been into one of the virtual labs on the APNIC Academy. How about completing a course and doing a certificate? How about, oh, there's some very loyal followers of the APNIC Academy. How about doing a video tutorial on the APNIC Academy? Fantastic. And most importantly, how many people have completed a survey on the APNIC Academy website to go on the prize draw, which will be drawn on tomorrow? These are some of the things I'd just like to touch on, and I'm very happy to be able to give this update. The APNIC Academy was launched back in early 2017, and we gave it about 12 months to sort of look at activity and look at feedback that people had. And we made some decisions very early this year to make some significant changes, things that we felt that would meet some of the training needs that you have and to support the staff that are around you. So some of the key improvements we've made, and it goes back to a little bit of what Adam had mentioned earlier, is that we have designed the user interface and the design, and we've made it far more simpler for you to be able to navigate and access content. In that, we've also improved the load times on the Academy website. We've added HTML5 support, which allows you to access that via your mobile phone, and we've given it a much more contemporary design. Part of the migration process, we have moved over the existing online courses that we had on the Academy website, and some of you have completed that. They're still available on the new Academy website, but through a different interface. So here you'll see that you have a navigation bar to the right-hand side, you've got course progress to the top right-hand corner, and you have the ability as you're moving through the respective modules to also complete course notes if you wish and save that against your profile. We do get asked a lot, do I get a certificate from this? Well, if you happen to go through the course and complete the quizzes, then you do get issued a certificate of achievement. Since we launched this, since we rebranded and reintroduced this new platform, which was only, I must say, 14 days ago, we've had over 200 certificates completed on the website. We've also added onto the APNIC Academy website, based on your feedback, third-party resources. We will progressively add more and more over time, but there is resources there for manners, which have a booth out the front from Internet Society, from ISOC, an introduction to network forensics and analysis, Internet of Things, and we have a whole pipeline of different resources that we will be adding onto the Academy website. So I do encourage you to access the other resources. It doesn't stand out as much as the other aspects of the Academy website, but nonetheless it's still a valuable part of your learning, and we will offer these resources within future courses so you can see the connections between your study and other resources that we think complement your learning. One of the big improvements or additions that we've added to the Academy website is new virtual labs. A lot of the feedback we got was we need more practical time, more hands-on time working with routers, working in a lab environment. So we've spent a fair bit of time introducing virtual labs as a pilot on the Academy website, where it allows you to launch labs within your browser within the matter of a few minutes, and it gives you access to be able to interact with those devices. So if it's a Cisco router, you could then log in and see and interact with the CLI or the command line interface. At this time, we've loaded some Cisco labs and some Microtech labs, and we will add some other vendors in there to give you a chance to play across different vendor types. Not only does this give you sort of a real production sense of real routers and real switches and real hosts, but it allows you to save the work that you're doing. So you can use, for instance, a sandbox, and I'll explain that in a moment, but you could use a sandbox to implement some of the more complex things that you are trying to implement in your workplace, and it's not affecting your production environment. The other big thing about this is there's no configuration requirement. There's no need to install any software on your computer. It all happens within the browser. Here, for an example, I have a router, a switch, and 2 hosts. It's a very basic topology. And this is the interface that you'll go into from the Academy website. Here on the left-hand side, you have a Linux instance that you can interact with as the host. Again, this is a fully bootable device that we've managed for you to load up within your browser. And on the right-hand side is the lab instructions. These are things that you can follow to do certain things. We have loaded a lab up here for Slack and DHCP v6 for those that are interested in deployment of IPv6, and I encourage you to take a look at this particular lab. Here you can switch between the hosts, and you can switch between the router, and here we're in a Cisco router, and this is a full production grade router that you can interact with, and again this spins up within a matter of a few minutes within your browser. We've also loaded some sandboxes based on some requests. So here you've got 6 routers, you've got some configuration, you've got a configuration host, you've got some test hosts. This is basically an opportunity for you to play, break, learn, get routers talking with each other, making sure they're configuring paths. Again, very easy for you to launch and very easy for you to play without any software installed on your computer. One of the other things that the community was asking for is some video tutorials, the ability to help guide through in some instructions. You may be familiar with a lot of that content on YouTube. So what we decided to do for each of the virtual labs was to create a video tutorial. So for the 2 labs that we have with Slack and DHCP v6, we've loaded these video tutorials. What's great about this is it is video. You get to also hear an instructor speaking over the video, and you also have captions in English at this time. And it's our view to add more captions and more subtitles over time. And this is very browser friendly, mobile friendly, and allows you to expand it for the full width of your screen to interact. So if you get stuck in the labs, you have the opportunity to follow the video tutorial to be able to complete it. Since going live, which was only 14 days ago, for me it feels like a couple of months because we've done a lot of work in setting up the Academy. We've had 1,384 unique visits to the site, 24,000 page views, and we're getting roughly about 130 users on the site per day. Interestingly, we've got some mobile users, 20% of you, 80% on the desktop. Females are doing really well, nearly 30%. Keep that going. What it really is a great highlight is there's been 98 hours of time spent on the virtual labs. So if you give that some comparison, the 5 days of workshops that we've had prior to this conference was roughly about 100 hours of contact time across the 4 streams, and we've been able to compare that with also the virtual, or match that with the virtual labs in terms of total time. So that's an excellent result. So I know many of you are in there interacting with the virtual labs, and 178 virtual labs have been launched. So that's my overview of the Academy. Many of you are aware of it. Hopefully you've got better understanding of the other things that are available on the Academy, and there's certainly a lot more that we're going to be adding over time. And we've had so far from the survey over 150 respondents to the survey, and there's lots of extra feedback and things that we're going to take on board for further iterations and further enhancements to the Academy. So on that note, I'd like to just refer back to the audience if they had any questions of me. And how much time do we have, George?
You have plenty of time.
Plenty of time. Some questions from the audience about the Academy.
Any of the users at the back, you have any comment or questions?
Probably the lady behind should ask this, but I asked for her. I asked the question for her because she mentioned it to me. And do our courses have audio? I mean, our standard courses.
An excellent question. So the online courses that we have, the e-learning courses, they don't have audio attached to them. The video tutorials do because they're new content that we've added to the website. And if you're doing things like some of you who are fellows might have done the policy development course, again, we've introduced audio. So as we're starting to introduce more content, we'll start introducing more video-based content, and we'll start introducing captions and audio with that content. But to answer your question, the current 3 online courses don't have audio attached to them.
But the future one.
Absolutely, the future is audio and also subtitle captions.
Hi, I'm Krishna from Nepal.
Yes.
Is there any plan to have like interaction with the trainer? Like, let's say if I'm doing lab and got stuck, then I can text someone, then APNIC will respond, or APNIC trainer will respond.
My short response is yes, based on just the sheer amount of feedback we've received out of the 150 that have responded to the survey. And there's at least 15, 16 people that have said we would like that one-on-one technical assistant, tuition, help, tutoring, however you want to define that, to help with the learning. So that's something when we finish the conference, we'll take stock of all the feedback, and then we'll work out what we can do to improve the site. And that is something that has emerged as a feature request for the Academy.
Is there any plan to have like discussion forum for a particular topic, like open forum?
Yes, we haven't enabled it. We haven't enabled it yet, but there is the ability for each of the courses to enable forums and allow interactivity, so it's two-way.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bikram Shrestha. I am from Sanima Bank, Nepal.
Yes.
Is this for only APNIC member, or any can learn this course?
Good question. So is this open, or is it restricted to only APNIC members? It's open to the community. So if you're not an APNIC member, you can access the APNIC Academy website. We are piloting the virtual labs. That's also open to everyone as well. And then once we've had a look at all the analytic data, we will then make a decision about the future of the virtual labs and whether it's open to all or available to members. But at this time, to answer your question, absolutely freely available, free courses, free certificates, free virtual labs, free video tutorials for everybody. Just register on the site and get your colleagues to access it and use the system. We encourage it.
Any more questions? I have one. So, do you have any plan to add more new training courses in the near future, and what are they?
So there's been not only has there been feedback from the survey about suggesting future topics to go on to, subjects to go on to the Academy, but also it's come strongly through the survey, that every 2 years we do the survey. So again, after the conference, we will bring that together and work a pathway in terms of a roadmap of courses for the Academy. To answer your question very specifically, there is a definite thread of interest in security courses and deployment of IPv6.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Clay from APNIC. On the Adobe, Aftab would like to have a quick comment and say, great job, APNIC.
Oh, thank you for the comments. There's another question?
Hi, Priscilla from Papua New Guinea, representing myself. Basically, the courses are introductory courses at the moment, so are you planning to put intermediate and other higher level of courses later on?
Yes, we are. So we think that the Academy has a place for introductory, intermediate and advanced. You can see that already with the full mesh lab topologies that are being set up in the virtual labs. It's starting to move into that more, offering more advanced training as well.
Any more question or comment? We still have just 1 more minute. No? All right.
Perfect. Thank you, George.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. I know we have 6 presentations today, so there's a lot of information in there. So what's the best way to follow up with all these development? And I would say subscribe to APNIC blog, so we would do our best to update you with progress and changes. And wherever relevant, you might receive email in your inbox. But apart from that, we are all here at your services and answer questions. So if you have any specific detailed questions, feel free to talk to any one of us here. And I think with Ellie's presentation about the contact updates, we are also able to show some demo or test at the APNIC lounge just outside this room. So feel free to pop over and ask a question and maybe have a look at it and share your feedback. So it is important that we have your feedback so we can make continuous improvement. And just on the topic of feedback, I would also be very happy to hear from you how we can continue to make this session more useful and relevant and interesting to you. So please get in touch. Thank you all for your time. Thank you.